Okay, short reviews for May 18th. Well, short reviews for the end of the month, more or less. There's going to be one more edition of short reviews for May, and that'll be mostly things that released on the 26th, and this will be mostly things that released on the 26th. Um, and all pretty interesting in their own way. This We'll start with Frozen Souls Glacial Domination. This is their second full length album. This is a Texas based death metal slash metallic hardcore band. And in terms of bolt thrower influenced, the side of old school death metal, which has simplified itself down to 90s metallic hardcore influenced, late 90s metallic hardcore influenced riffs, is it's a dime a dozen these days. And this is just a band that quickly found themselves on a very big label and with a lot of push behind what they do, and probably very much due to the fact that they are a good or a great live band, and that they're in it to tour, they're in it to push, and you can tell they put in a lot of time and effort into the reality of their presence, both on record and in person. I think they're a much better live band than they do kind of show on a record. Their records are never really they haven't so far. Their very few releases have not been very well thought out. They've been very straightforward, and don't really add that much, for my taste, to old school death metal meeting up with metallic hardcore. Um, there's some pretty interesting bands that also play in this style, but we'll get past them and we'll get into what this record is pretty quickly. So, um, this is their attempt to kind of put a lot more thought and more of a vision into a full length. And as we see it, Glacial Domination is just a little bit more of the same. The production values have been amped up. Some of the songwriting has been pushed along. The co-producer on this is Matt Heafy from Trivium. You might know him from death metal bands, 20 plus years ago. But none of that really factors into what this is. I think when they try to go melodic with it, they do kind of hit upon like Amon Amarth and Hatebreed and a little bit of Obituary in there too, as per usual. But it doesn't ever become tuneful in a way that is just worthy of so much hype. So really, it's a good kind of death metal, mosh metal record, and I'm sure it'll play well really live because it fits along with their first album quite well. So if you're looking for iteration with a little bit more refinement, I think this is a good choice. I also think it's about 10 minutes too long. I think they really overstate themselves on this album, and I it's sort of like up front you get all these great like kind of shredding moshable songs, and then by the second half of the album they're just kind of trudging away at a lot of slower, kind of less interesting pieces. So this is definitely front loaded, and if you're really just skimming through music and just passing through as fast as possible, I think they make a strong impression. But if you sit with this record about 20 times, I think you'll be done about the 10th time. So that's my take. See what you think.
My hate.
So the major reason that Boston, Massachusetts-based hard rock, stoner rock kind of band Gozu caught my ear with Remedy was probably the first and second track on this album, which have a little bit of a movement between like the Soundgarden and the Alice in Chains style hooks, which still translate into their sort of stoner alternative hard rock sound. Um, this is kind of just a classic melange, like a mix of stoner rock and stoner metal ideas, and they deliver it with a lot of thought in terms of just detail. They're putting a lot of detail into these songs, and they remain like kind of rapid fire ideas that are pretty redeeming. The problem is that it all becomes kind of a mess as you listen to the full thing. It's a ride. You can take it on through the full record, but there's a lot of misses here, and I think that they show up more towards the middle and the end of the record, where they overstate themselves. They find kind of hooks and a tone that just doesn't work for me, and it just this record was like it pulled me in right away. and side B was just kind of an afterthought, and yeah, it was just inconsistent for me. So worth checking out. I think there are some songs that will just kind of hit in the best way possible, but they didn't edit out the stuff that just didn't work. Ouroboros Lust is the latest full-length album from Hail Conjurer, a Finnish one-man project, which is known for basically just kind of putting together an album on the spot, maybe doing it in one sitting or just over the course of a short period of time, and finding some conceptual idea within it, or really just whatever comes naturally to the artist during that session. I think that's how it usually works, and with that in mind, it's always been an impressive undertaking. There's been a lot of experimentation with very lo-fi or just aggressively noisome uh, sound with the project, and I think that translates here in some ways. But this is one of his more kind of slick, more cleanly conceived and delivered releases, which matches up with the the themes and the tone here, which is still very much a hellish kind of black metal experience in most ways, but also brings in some more psychedelic and slicker movements. I don't know. I don't know how to say it exactly because this is kind of a unique thing that um, is very different from Earth Penetration. So I really appreciated that because that was kind of more a more raw, um, different feeling, and this is its own thing. Um, so I don't know how repeatable these records are over time. It's really something you show up for and then you come back to later. But I appreciated that. Yeah, this album found a way to do something new, something a little bit different, and I like the audio visual sort of the way they play together. It's pretty strong. The presentation overall. Gra Ande. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but this is a band from Noxite, who is basically best known as the guy behind Luster, and you'll feel that right away in terms of the way that he presents this album. I think it has a different vocalist and it presents different themes and tone. This is a shift in more of a clear black metal direction. It is still atmospheric black metal, and in that unique register, which uses synth and sort of an ambient dungeon synth feeling to create a sense of space. And this record is just a first step into this realm. It's very much delineated between two songs that do two different things, but create a very deep atmosphere, a very strong immersion, and a lot of that has to do with both sound design and delivery, and the sort of obsessive, sort of droning feeling of the pieces. And I found like when I first ran through it, it didn't really hit me beyond the kind of glowing synth tones. And then when I returned to it 3 or 4 times, you really saw the experience as like sort of an ominous trek forward. And I think there's a lot of value to it as an experience. It's not, it doesn't grab you like a metal record quite as you would expect from like a Swedish black metal record, but it's still, in their own sense, it is still effective as an atmospherically and through the statement, the lyrics. So I think it's worth checking out. Again, it's the first step, so I think they'll become more elaborate with it over time. And I like the fact that there's two very long pieces because I think longer form is probably better for this sound. Supercluster is I believe, the debut release from Jaw, which is they kind of call it a super group. I kind of hate that term, but it does have Andy Cairns of Therapy and Wayne Adams of a very well known producer and engineer, as well as a member of Pet Brick. as well as members of other bands you may know if you're in tune with that type of music. This is a post-industrial music in most senses. There are some noise rock and sort of other electronic and like metal influences here and there too. And it really is what I see is similar to Pet Brick. It's whatever sticks and works. Really, it's a very experimental feeling record in its undertaking. It doesn't feel like they wrote up a concept of how we need to cover all these bases. It was more, this is what came naturally, and they really made sense of it in a way that is it's a fine record. It does jump around a lot though, so if you're in for something that is like eclectic as a point of purpose, this is probably a great record for you. If you like everything from Lightning Bolt to Jezu to like, and you're up for a Bjork cover of Army of Me that isn't by Helmet, I mean, there's a pretty good one here too. So interesting record, and one that I think it's easy to kind of skip past it, but once you get into the thick of it, there's a lot of pretty cool stuff happening. Woven Dark Past is the latest release from Finnish black metal band Sarbekus, and this is definitely a Finnish black metal band in the sense that it is pushing for something that is decidedly 90s. It is bringing a little bit of its own modern spin on the melodic side of it, and it is a very strong, exuberant, and fairly aggressive black metal record. And I think it'd be easy to tag this band as melodic. I think just because the most interesting parts of this record are generally melodic, but there is a sort of grandeur to their delivery that is still muscular and aggressive and has a sort of a pagan black metal spirit to it, which is pretty interesting for my own taste. I don't know that it is outstanding in terms of being well above average, but it is above average black metal music and just gives a strong full listen. I think I only ran through it about 5 times before I kind of got the idea, but I think there's a clear quality standard here, a very high standard, and I had a good time with it. Serpent's Call is I believe, is it? It might be. I think it's the debut from Violent Sin, a Belgium-based, let's call them a speed metal band. Uh, in the same way that like Nasty Savage's debut is speed metal, and the first Hallows Eve album is speed metal, where there's certainly like some thrash metal in there, and there is a distinction there. But there's the primary influence of their songwriting is the new wave of British heavy metal, and uh, this is a more wild, aggressive version of that. I don't. It doesn't necessarily touch upon early speed metal in any sense, but there is still a very clear '80s heavy metal touch to it, and I don't know if they want to be pegged as a like a retro band, but it certainly is the demographic for this style of heavy metal, and it's all right. I don't think this is like just the most electric and intelligent, heavy metal record you're ever going to hear, but there's a lot of energy behind it. It is a very classic sound, and there's plenty of spectacle in terms of just catching your ear with these songs, and that's kind of what you would want from a throwback style speed metal band. So Red Mass is I believe, Canadian artist who is this is experimental music, and this is I assume the sixth volume of their experimental side, and this is let's call it noise infused black metal punk, extreme metal punk, a very chaotic and ritualistic undertaking that seems to be mostly both improvised and kind of on the spot craft, and sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses. as I listen to this more and more, I realize that this feels more like uh, the same way a psychedelic musician or psychedelic rock or just psychedelia interested musician would put together an improvisational recording. Uh, Basically, because of how the beats and the music comes together. So the structure of this thing is certainly akin to psychedelic music, but the sound is harsh noise and sort of untouched raw guitar sounds and spaced out programmed beats and things like that, which somehow turn into kind of metal punk in the way there. So there's sort of this early post-industrial spirit to some of it, while there's also a sort of modern anything goes noise, you know, thing going on there. It's very abrasive, but there are a couple songs that really kind of come together. There's sort of, like I say, there's kind of two bands going on here, and two sides of the general modus of the artist as he puts it all together that don't quite meet up, but when they do halfway, there's something interesting that happens, and yeah, it was worth talking about. So check that out.